Ransomware is surging, AI is racing ahead of governance, and now AI deepfake voices and videos are giving fraudsters terrifying new tools to use against credit unions. Today, we're talking about how prepared credit unions really are, what it takes to govern AI safely, and how to defend against synthetic identity and deepfake attacks. Welcome to Grow Your Credit Union, the podcast where credit union leaders gather, learn, and grow. I am your host, Joshua Barkley. Before we begin today's show, I want to first mention our sponsor, the National Credit Union Information Sharing and Analysis Organization, better known by the acronym NCU-ISAO. NCU-ISAO helps credit unions strengthen their cybersecurity defenses by delivering real-time threat intelligence, expert guidance, and a trusted community for sharing insights and staying ahead of emerging risks. You will hear more about NCU-ISAO later in the show. All right, let me bring in our sponsored guest for today's conversation. He's the CEO and president of NCU-ISAO, Brian Hinsey. Brian, welcome.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited about today.
I'm excited as well. And Brian, you brought a very special guest co-host to the show today. He is the Director of Information Security and Cyber Risk at Advia Credit Union, Otto Ricardo. Otto, happy to have you with me in the co-host chair, my man.
Hi, likewise. It's a pleasure to be here.
Ransomware resiliency now demands more than tools. It takes discipline, testing, and constant modernization, especially for credit unions. According to CrowdStrike's State of Ransomware survey, 78% of organizations were hit by ransomware attacks in the last 12 months, even though most believe they were prepared. Of those victims who felt well prepared, only 22% recovered within 24 hours, and just 38% actually fixed the vulnerability that let attackers in. Brian, this CrowdStrike survey, it kind of paints a worrying picture, to be honest with you. So what I'm wondering, in your own research and what you're seeing across the NCU-ISAO network, are credit unions experiencing similar ransomware trends?
I first want to asterisk the CrowdStrike survey. I am familiar with it. I think one of the things with whenever you do a survey with respondents, it's important to note not only potential bias of the respondents, but the data that makes it up. That number is definitely inflated, which is good news. The bad news is it's still really bad. We're actually set for a record year in 2025. I actually validated this just to make sure if this question came up that we would have some accurate data. And indeed, you're looking at about 40% increase in global victims. And that's just based off of this tactic that the ransomware groups use to extort victims by threatening to publish their data online, claiming them as a victim. There's several that go unannounced if they're, willing to negotiate early. So that's the unfortunate circumstances that compared to last year, it's up pretty significantly. On the good news side, to throw a little bit of that in, I'd say from a third-party vendor standpoint, which represents a real tangible risk to credit unions with the high amount of outsourcing, I'd say that compared to late 23 and early 24, especially 2025, even though there was kind of a big one that's just made the news here recently in December, compared to 2025, the third-party breaches impacting credit unions have not been as bad. That said, because it makes up a typical percentage, I would say that we will see more credit unions in 2025 having been impacted by ransomware and or extortion by the same groups than we did the year before. So it's not only at an all-time high, but I'd say with the credit unions as well, it's indeed at an all-time high.
Otto, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that CrowdStrike data, because you're on the front lines, you're dealing with this very firsthand, and from your vantage point in talking with other credit union folks, what are you seeing this year in terms of ransomware attacks? Does it feel like this has become more prevalent, or is this just business as usual?
Yeah, it is. Over the last 5 years, it's just business as usual due to being in the financial services industry. So we're constantly being targeted. Most often is, vulnerability scanning on your external presence or phishing emails.
Brian, when you're looking at the vulnerabilities and sort of the ways that these ransomware attackers like to attack or penetrate tactic wise. Is there a common pattern you see?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say if you consider human as your largest threat surface and potentially your greatest risk or vulnerabilities should they be compromised with their credentials and things like that, I'd say it's a couple things. To directly stem off of what Otto said, yeah, absolutely edge devices. Any sort of hardware that sits at the network edge has been pretty consistently attacked, whether it's related to direct published vulnerabilities in their software or just attempts to really kind of brute force credentials or even enumerate the location of those devices. These are like VPNs and firewalls. That's been pretty popular as a tactic amongst ransomware groups in general. If we talk about the human factor as inherently by itself a vulnerability, I would say that there's plenty of data out there to indicate that identity is still the number one attack vector of choice. Phishing is coming in several different flavors when we talk about themes or lures or like, what are they trying to use as a tactic to get you to click? But at the end of the day, probably because of its widespread adoption in the enterprise, Microsoft credentials are under siege much more than any other ones. In fact, I'd say the bulk of what we see as a community through shares and our own analysis is attempts to target with advanced phishing Microsoft credentials for sure.
Otto, when we're thinking about preparedness in terms of credit unions, what do you think about? How do you prepare? How are you preparing for these types of attacks? Can you be prepared for these types of attacks? Maybe the better question.
Yeah, so prepare as much as you can by reviewing your business continuity processes from like a technical perspective, ensuring you have an incident response plan, just to be sure that when something does happen, you are able to activate those and ensure that you have the proper processes and actions to limit the impact.
Yeah, and I'd add on that too, just if we talk about the CrowdStrike survey, I mean, recovering in 24 hours from a true ransomware attack is an exceptional achievement. There's a lot of things that can kind of go into that. One of the other gaps in that data is not just, why did people take this survey? Was it disproportionate to people who wanted to understand what the other circumstances were from other groups that got compromised by ransomware? But also in this case, we don't know what was hit. Was it an endpoint and they were able to quickly validate that there was no network activity where data had potentially left and it hadn't moved laterally and they just reimaged the endpoint? I mean, that's one thing. If it's web shells are installed on multiple different servers and systems and they lock all those down, you recover in one day, that's an absolute miracle at that point. So I'd say there's a number of factors that really go into it. But like Otto said, it is about having a plan, ransomware specific plan, testing it, going through some of those what if scenarios, and then identifying gaps and addressing them through proper cyber best practice. So.
AI governance, it's the foundation that makes AI safe, compliant, and actually usable across your credit union. According to the PEX report 2025-26, only 43% of organizations have an AI governance policy, and nearly a third have none at all. Brian, this is beautiful because we get to stress test some more data in your talks with credit union folks, in the data that you're seeing and in the conversations that you're having. Do you think that the credit union industry is moving in the right direction when it comes to AI governance?
Actually, I do. And we do have the data. This was a question we asked in our annual fall survey that we do industry-wide. That said, I would say overall, it's still a relatively small sample size given the thousands of credit unions in the United States. So there's my own asterisk against our own data. That said, in our data, we're showing that credit unions, about a third of them, 32 or 33%, had an AI governance policy in 2024 in that fall survey. That has jumped up to 2/3 of organizations for this year. So it was about 65%, I want to say, and some change. And then another 20% reported having it in the works. So that's, at least in our sample size, 85% of them said that they either had one in the works or do have one. So that is an absolutely fantastic start when we talk about AI governance and really at least defining that acceptable use policy within the organization.
Otto, let me ask you, over at Advia Credit Union, do you have an AI governance policy in place, or is that something that you are currently working out?
We do. We do have a governance policy. And not only that, but we also block all of the personal chat GPTs or Claude or any of that sort of thing. So like our users aren't able to visit those websites or even submit any sort of data to them.
When we're thinking about an AI governance policy, Brian, it's so loose to me, right? Because it's not like I can look at 50 years of AI governance policies. So when you're talking to folks, what does your gut tell you at what is necessary in these policies? Obviously, the NCUA has been coming out with some guidance, but it's still a little iffy, right?
Yeah, and I'd like to volley some of the gaps on my response back with Otto on this as well, 'cause off the top of my head. Naturally, what is permitted and what isn't permitted, right? It's like any other employee policy, especially with something new and emerging tech like this. It can be exciting, especially for the eager go-getters. So you got to tell them what they can't do. And then I really think it's important that you educate them on why they can't do it. To my knowledge, looking at the data, the number one AI-related breach is people putting sensitive information into a public AI model. The second is when you define what they can and can't use. I think govern yourself as an organization, like Otto just said, which is using web content filtering, your firewall, whatever your weapon of choice is, to prevent your employees inside the network from actually being able to visit the sites that you said they couldn't use. I think those are a couple of the really key ones. Maybe some organizations go a little bit deeper and assess what it means for employees who abuse the policy. I don't know, Otto, what else have I potentially missed?
Well, I think partnering with the legal team as well and partnering with compliance, just to make sure that if people are using those AI tools, it's being done responsibly.
Otto, I got something for you. You mentioned a few of the things that make good AI governance, but when you were developing your policy and your standards, what were some of the obstacles that you had? Because I feel like telling my employees not to use ChatGPT, that one I think is kind of self-explanatory, but there's got to be some other things that were maybe more difficult when developing this. So could you give me your insights on maybe some of those challenges or roadblocks?
Absolutely. And I think the biggest hurdle for organizations out there is getting buy-in from their senior management or executive management. I believe that to have proper AI governance, they have to be your top supporters. And then from there, being able to ensure that not only you have the policy in place, but you also have the technical controls to kind of like limit access.
So leadership, we got to get the leaders on board. Brian, anything else we can throw in that equation for our listeners?
Let's not forget that once we have sort of the basic terms of use and we start blocking some of these things, the next part is auditability. It's going to be dependent on how you're using AI in the organization. In this point in time, I'm not referring to the specific third-party tools that you may bring on board that's, a new fintech product or something like that. I'm talking about the use of AI inside. You have to make sure that whatever that looks like, if you are planning to use it, which most credit unions say they're using it in some capacity, that you have the ability to monitor what is actually being put into the system, who's doing it, and those types of things. That's a really important next step after the acceptable use.
Cybersecurity threats are evolving faster than ever, and credit unions are increasingly in the crosshairs. But you don't have to face those threats alone. NCU-ISAO is the only organization fully dedicated to protecting credit unions, their members, and the cooperative movement through real-time information sharing, expert-led analysis, and a rapidly growing community of security-minded professionals. When you join NCU-ISAO, you get access to timely threat intelligence, actionable alerts, exclusive member briefings, and a network of peers who understand exactly what you're up against. Whether you're a small credit union with a lean IT team or a large institution looking to elevate your security posture, NCU-ISAO helps you stay ahead of emerging risks before they impact you or your members. Strengthen your credit union's defenses with the power of collaboration. Learn more and join today at ncuisao.org/GYCU. Yes, I'll spell that out for you. ncuisao.org/GYCU. NCU-ISAO, protecting the movement, one credit union at a time. Criminals are now using synthetic voices and videos to impersonate CEOs, vendors, and even regulators. bypassing traditional authentication and tricking employees into handing over credentials or initiating transactions. This is a very interesting study. So in a 2025 study from researchers at UC Berkeley, more than half of people couldn't tell when a real human voice was real. So they would have a set of people listen to a human voice and say, is this a real human voice? And about 53% of them could not tell the difference between an AI generated voice and a human voice. So Brian, this study was done at UC Berkeley. I even heard the story famously now about the then President Biden in New Hampshire calling voters, telling them not to turn out for that day's vote, telling them to stay at home and save their vote. Now, those are some high profile things, but I'm wondering how real and immediate is the deepfake threat for credit unions?
I mean, I would say it's very real and fairly immediate, but it does depend on a few factors because there's not just one kind of area of focus for these threat actors. So I guess to kind of break it down, AI-driven fake media with like Know Your Customer or KYC documents has actually been around quite some time already. And it was over a year ago now that FinCEN issued an alert dating back to data from 2023 that deepfake was being used to fake media to falsify documents for various activities in financial institutions. So it kind of started there. When we talk about the audio deepfake, I would say this is going to be where you'll ask yourself some questions as a credit union. So does our CEO or key leadership team, are they really active out on social media? Do they have a lot of recorded content? That's going to put them at a little bit more risk than an organization that doesn't, frankly, just because I can tell you through my own demonstrations that I do and talks that I give on this topic that 10 to 30 seconds of audio is all you really need to create a deepfake with a legitimate paid tool, which will cost you a whopping $5 a month. Pretty scary in that regard. So I think awareness is really critical, and we can talk about some of that in this session. Additionally, do you hire remote IT workers? That's a very real threat as well. It's not exclusive to remote IT workers, but the deepfake threat specifically, not exclusively, but specifically in this context from North Korean actors and a whole network of mules they have across the United States is also problematic for sure. And then are your members regularly targeted with brand impersonation attacks? This is like, we've all gotten those text messages, right? Where it's like, hey, we locked down your account because you spent $400 at XYZ retailer or whatever it is. Log in here and it sends you to a perfect image of the credit union's login page. At that point, if there's some social engineering involved to get full access to the account, who's to stop a threat actor from recording the conversation? Even if the member of the credit union doesn't fall for it, they can go back to those legitimate tools, create a fully agentic version, deepfake of the member, and maybe try to call into the call center. So it's going to depend a little bit on what it looks like at your credit union, but the threat is very real. And those are just 4 solid examples of where that threat could lie.
Auto AI deepfakes, is that something that you are thinking about or talking about at Advia Credit Union, or is it something that is not a near-term thought?
No, absolutely. We are prioritizing mainly training our staff to ensure they have the proper processes in place. For instance, to send a wire, to send some money out, basically. Ensuring that not only is like one person, but then you have a second person double checking and ensuring that something is legitimate. And from a technical standpoint, we see a lot of these invoice scams coming from phishing emails or even spoofed emails.
So it still comes down to humans tricking humans, right? Brian, you kind of mentioned the big vulnerability is humans, but this question's for the both of you. If 53% of people in this UC Berkeley survey can't tell the difference between a real voice and an AI generated voice, then what is the real solution to this when it becomes more common, more sophisticated? I'm thinking about this and I'm like, how do we deal with this?
And for me, we're talking about this in the enterprise, right? We're talking about this at the credit unions, but, more of our time is probably spent, on things like social media and whatnot. And if you, go to places like Reddit or even just Facebook, Instagram, there's AI all over the place. We have to ask ourselves some real questions about what we're watching. Does this feel real? Does it seem real? Being a little bit more cautious, I think, is really important, as with any scam, because what you're talking about, maybe with the exception of the IT worker scenario with like video deepfakes and all of that elaborate scheme there. This is really just a new vehicle to try to open the door to old scams. So I would also say then for that reason, the resilience is going to be things like, depending on what we're talking about, good password hygiene. What Otto just talked about is someone's going to impersonate your CEO to try to authorize a funds transfer. This happened in Southeast Asia last year, and it was a 6-figure loss for the organization when the CEO was impersonated effectively against the CFO. So dual authorization patterns, for consumers, multi-factor authentication, things are going to help, as with a phishing email in the same way, stop the threat actors in their tracks. This is how we need to consider this, because it is going to become more convincing. I'm hearing about public-facing kidnapping scams using AI and trying to use video deepfakes to try to make it look like one of your loved ones was kidnapped and they're holding that for ransom when really your loved one's in school. They just can't have their phone on them, so they can't communicate. It's really complicated. So it's going to be slow down, don't follow the pressure tactics, try to make the best decision you can, and then shore your defenses up on the back end with good, logical best practices that you would have against any fraud. And I think it will be better off.
My concern, and I'm not alone here, I think it's everyone's concern, Brian, Otto, is that things get so good in terms of these deepfakes that I can't believe anything anymore. And then we're living in this, everyone's like post-truth world, but that's really a post-truth world. If I get a video and I can't even tell if it's real or not. So are you mentally, Brian, your organization might be doing some therapy, no? Like this paranoid world that we're moving into. Any thoughts on that?
There's a shock value, and I guess what I would say is for us, we've been lucky to have some good technical support on these new emerging topics. We're able to introduce them sort of slowly but surely as we're finding these new tactics. So that's not to say that we're doing something better necessarily than anyone else. But at the end of the day, sort of slowly introducing this level of education feels like you can kind of get baseline and you're like, okay, so this is sort of the entry level right now. It's document deep fakes and manipulating images into synthetic IDs. And now here's an audio deep fake. Now here's an audio agent. Now here's a video deep fake. It feels like that has been helpful a little bit to introduce this slowly over time as we follow the evolution of the scams versus somebody hearing about this for the first time and goes, holy cow, mind blown,
Brian, we talked about a lot of the emerging threats, some of the trends, some of your data, and doing research for this show, obviously, I got to look into NCU-ISAO, and it's becoming really, really important. So for the listeners, can you explain what NCU-ISAO does and how it supports credit unions in navigating these challenges?
Yeah, I mean, at the simplest form, we feel like we have this tertiary responsibility when it comes to informing our members and providing a safe environment for them to collaborate. How we execute it might be a little different. We won't get into that necessarily just yet, but first, it is, help navigate through this tidal wave of information that's out there. We've talked about just a few of the key topics here today in overall cyber and fraud resilience, technical resilience for credit union organizations. So we go and we gather and we try to pare the information down to what is relevant and as actionable as possible for them to keep them informed. Then it is hearing their stories. What are you seeing? What type of information can we pass along to the other members to help make them more resilient? Because it seems to have this funny factor about it that when an organization like Otto shares something and we publish that out, within a day or two, another organization saying, hey, well, look, thanks for the heads up because we just saw it too. And then the third place is providing them a collaborative opportunity to share information with each other. Whether that's operational resilience best practices, how to better harden an internal system against cyber attacks, or just, share some emerging threats that they might be seeing and asking opinions of the community. It's really those three things that come together to make NCU-ISAO what it is today. So building off the strength of its members primarily, and then taking that vast wealth of information that's out there in the wild and bringing that to them.
And that's the thing that I found so valuable, Brian, is the living, breathing network, the sharing of information in real time. When something happens, it's shared with the group. Otto, you are a member of NCU-ISAO with Advia Credit Union. Could you share some of the things that you really enjoy about this organization?
Absolutely. So what comes to mind is the sense of community. There are other bigger threat intelligence sharing organizations out there, but you feel like you're just a number there. And with NCU-ISAO, like I feel like your opinion matters, and then also it's more personal. So you get to meet other professionals in the credit union industry, professionals that may have the same struggles as you have, but you can brainstorm with them and find solutions to each other's problems.
And that's great. And Brian, talk to me a little bit about what you provide. So if I become a member, I'm listening and I'm like, this sounds great. I want to share information with Otto and vice versa and be part of this community that really has my best interests. What does that look like? Am I going to events? Am I getting some of this data that you had mentioned earlier in the show? Are we doing webinars? Talk to me about what that membership looks like from a day-to-day.
It's funny. We're member driven, just like a credit union community. And we, as any good business should, they should look for business friction and try to solve problems. So we look the same way in our community. And what that's resulted in is this sort of like ongoing joke for internally from my team where I'm like, our member benefits are robust. There's a lot of moving parts and a lot of great things. We're not going to add anything new this year. And then a new problem comes up. We're able to help solve it. And we add something new to membership. It just always happens. So that's sort of a precursor to say there's a lot going on. There's a lot of ways to consume information at NCU-ISAO, but it's absolutely a mix of us, if you want more arm's length participation, us sending you our highest confidence, most finished intelligence information via email, or you self-service it through our member resource hub and you kind of stay informed that way. There's the opportunity to be involved at a very granular level between our monthly meetings and our Slack community and say, hey, I want to participate and kind of know everything going on as it happens. And then a little bit of it that falls in between. Beyond that, because we recognize membership at the credit union level, one of the important things is whether you're somebody in Otto's role, you're a VP of risk management, you're a CEO or a CIO, we kind of have something for everybody to engage everyone from fraud, threats, leadership, physical security. And that's really made it a great way for unlimited participants from organizations to say, hey, I can sign up for the stuff that matters to me and not have to worry about consuming something that's sort of out of band or irrelevant to my interest level.
And you do have a very popular event. Just fun fact for the listeners, Grow Your Credit Union will be at Brian's event this year. But Brian, I want you to tell us what that event is, what makes it special, why people should join.
It is the CU Intersect Conference. It represents, the name itself represents the convergence of technology, security, and all the different disciplines that go into overall organizational resilience. It's coming up January 26th through 28th in New Orleans, Louisiana. We're really excited to be able to bring you a location that's right there on Bourbon Street too. So right in the heart of the French Quarter. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. It is almost sold out, but our event is a nice diverse mix of keynote sessions that, will challenge some of your preconceived notions, but also other sessions that'll, advance your business strategy to build your own breakout sessions and build your own tracks and go to a range of different breakout sessions that are, again, relevant and sort of juxtaposed to each other so that you can pick something that really applies to you. On top of that, Otto was talking about the sense of collaboration amongst the credit union community. I think that's as much as anything what our attendees tend to take away from it, which is those lasting partnerships and those new relationships that you get across such a collaborative industry like the credit union space.
I asked you this before, but I want to ask it again. If there is one particular topic that stands out for you, because you could pick any of these.
Well, I'll give you that topic in a moment, but I do want to highlight the co-host here today. Otto actually has two sessions. One is on their vulnerability management strategy at Advia Credit Union, and then he's also going to be co-presenting with me on advanced phishing resilience and talking about some of these potentially buzzwords you might have heard of, like FIDO2 or biometric authentication. We're going to show you exactly how those are resilient to some of those attacks. So I'm really excited to bring Otto on. He's going to be a busy man at our conference. Thanks for doing all of that, Otto. But I'll also say that amidst his notoriety and longevity in the cybersecurity space, as well as thought-provoking sessions, definitely having Win Schwartau on our first day as a keynote is going to be really exciting, challenging these notions of cognitive bias and how they impact your cybersecurity strategy is just sort of a, wait, what did you just say, Brian? Yes, cognitive bias and cognitive security and how that can play a role in how you structure your security. It's going to be really interesting, and I'm super excited about that session, among others.
So that'll be CU Intersect. If you're interested, check it out. We're doing an episode of what you're listening to right now at CU Intersect. It'll be me, Elizabeth Osborne, the COO at Great Lakes, and Becky Reed as usual. All right, that brings us to the end of the show. Brian, give me your final thoughts. Anything you want to leave the listeners with today?
You know, it's such an inherently negative topic, cybersecurity and threats, right? You know, I once went to a conference and somebody told me that they didn't know who was better at scaring people, the cyber folks or the legal folks, right? And so, so I'm going, okay, how do we turn this around? The good news is that whether you're participating in an organization like ours, you're participating in a government-sponsored local regional trade group, you're not alone. Getting out there, being active and learning from your peers on top of what you're already doing, which is a pretty darn good job at staying resilient against all these attacks. I mean, even on ransomware, financial services makes up a very small percentage of global ransomware victims. It's not to be minimized, the threat itself, but I mean, it's still, they do a great job, and credit unions do a great job overall being resilient against these attacks. So remember, you're not alone and you're already doing a great job. Keep doing the right thing and it'll keep getting better.
And Brian, if someone's listening and they like the game that you're throwing down today and they want to get in touch with you, what is the best way to do that?
Probably our website. We can put you in touch with a number of our resources, including our various monthly membership overviews, things like that. So if this interests you, head over to NCU-ISAO.org. We have a special landing page for listeners of this podcast. So it is /GYCU. There's a contact form there. We'll receive that. We'll send you some opportunities to learn more about the organization, or even just join right away if you're ready to go.
Perfect. Otto, final thoughts. Anything you want to unleash for the listeners?
So I would like them to join NCU-ISAO because the bigger the community, the better the intelligence will be.
So join NCU-ISAO and let's raise the tide together. Otto, I like it. I have to thank Brian. Thank you so much, Brian. Otto, have to thank you. And then I have to thank our sponsor, NCU-ISAO. And a special thanks goes out there to our listeners for continuing to support and listen to another episode of Grow Your Credit Union. If you like the show, follow us on your podcast player of choice. If you want to be a guest or would like to talk about sponsorship opportunities, head to growyourcreditunion.com to learn more. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.